Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first and only exclusive webinar for high school students. My name is Dr. Leena Khanzode. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, and I am really delighted to host this first webinar through our nonprofit, Taarika Foundation. So I'm going to share a little bit of information about Taarika, and I hope you guys will get a little bit more understanding about what work we do. So Taarika Foundation is a 501c nonprofit mental health organization that focuses on mental health in children and adolescents. Our mission is to raise awareness about mental health in children and adolescents, break mental illness stigma, improve mental health in children and teens in our community. Our work, how we do this, we educate parents and youth about youth mental health issues by conducting educational talks, workshops, webinars, and using social media as a platform to disseminate helpful information to create this awareness. We teach stress management tools like mindfulness to youth, and we use this as a way to, bring them in a group and teach these skills together so we can all experience this together. We also do workshops to kind of, give you a little preview of what this looks like. And then if interested, people can generally join for a group. So in terms of our recent projects, some of you already know, we launched a podcast a few months ago, and it's called Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving. It's a podcast focused on youth mental health, and it's available on Apple, Spotify, and Google. It has two segments. The parent segment is focused on giving parenting tips to parents to help raise a whole child. And there is a youth segment that helps kids to understand more about mental health issues and talk openly about mental health issues and understand the different treatments that are out there. Our most recent project, and today is actually World Mental Health Day. So happy World Mental Day to all of you. I'm excited to launch our YouTube channel on this special day, and it's going to be called as Supporting the Whole Child. So be sure to check it out. It's going to be, again, similar information as our podcast, but it will be on video. And our upcoming project, so as a follow-up to this session, I hope some of you would be interested in doing this. We will be running a mindful self-compassion group for teens, and it will be starting on Saturday, October 24th, and it will go on for 4 weeks. And it will be from 2 to 3:15 p.m. And we'll have Marina Barnes, who's a wonderful facilitator who's done this training and has ran groups before running this group. So we will also be able to email you guys a flyer so you can look at it and register if you're interested. I believe this will be a great thing to check out and register. So thank you. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our co-hosts for today. I wanted this webinar to be led by youth since it's all about youth. So we have two wonderful youth who will be co-leading this or co-hosting this. I will be actually in the background. So I'm delighted to introduce Divya and Vihan, who are going to be our co-hosts, and they will be the ones who will be interviewing our panelists and also conducting the whole session. So welcome Divya and Vihan.
Hey everyone, I'm Devya and I will be one of your co hosts today. I'm a sophomore in high school and I really love studying about mental health, psychology, and neuroscience, hence the reason why I joined Taarika Foundation and excited to host part of the webinar for you today.
Hi, my name is Vihan. I'm your second co host. I am a freshman in high school. I love learning about mental health, and I feel as though it is very important in our ever changing world, and that is the reason I joined the Taarika Foundation.
All right, so without further ado, we're going to begin. So, as many of you may know already, the webinar is titled Getting Motivated for Online School. And obviously, as many of you guys probably know, final exams in high school are coming up, and learning the proper methods to really get motivated for online school is definitely the need of the hour. So, I'm sure many of you guys are wondering, how will motivation really help you get the grades you deserve? And why is motivation really necessary? Well, simply put, motivation is a method to change our way of thinking, feeling, and behaving to essentially enhance our ability to grasp information. So, motivation will not only help us perform better in school, but it'll also help us retain that information needed for the future.
Now, before we start, there's just a few housekeeping reminders. The first 20 registrants attending the webinar will get gift cards by email, and we will have a few raffles throughout the webinar and a Kahoot quiz/game at the end for a chance to win gift cards as well. With that in mind, I'm super excited to kick off the Taarika Foundation's first ever webinar, Getting Motivated for Online School, where we will be hearing from 5 wonderful panelists, which include 2 high school seniors, a teacher, an executive function coach, and a therapist. Our first panelist is Malavika. Malavika Ebby is a senior at Monte Vista High School and author of Teen Self-Improvement plus Self-Impassion book, The Gift That Keeps on Giving. There is a pending publication on Amazon Kindle on October 22nd. She's passionate about the intersection of human health and human rights and hopes to pursue healthcare and policy in the future, working primarily with psychology and social emotional learning in high school. She's intrigued by the connection between individual well-being and societal well-being. She believes that when we learn to secure our own health, it frees us space in our lives to actively advocate for others' health, especially that of marginalized communities. In her free time, she enjoys taking part in creative arts like dancing, sketching, and poetry writing. Malavika, why do you think it is important to be motivated for school, even if it is online?
Mhm. When I think about motivation, I think it's this intrinsic need that you actually want to be doing whatever you have to do. And I think the problem with not having motivation is that, like, when there's so many things that are pending, if we don't actually have that inner drive to tell you, hey, like, I actually want to do this, I want to be doing this right now, then I don't think there's anything to take us to that goal and help us achieve it. So I think it's just so important, not only from the perspective that Divya mentioned of like wanting to get good grades, but also like, why do we go to school in the first place, right? To actually learn these things and use them in the future and pursue whatever goals and passions that we have. So I guess like the big picture purpose of motivation would be to actually get us to achieve our goals. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that very much. That was a very good answer, Malavika. So, my second question is, what are some challenges that you have faced in this new online setting? From school being in person to now it all being over the computer, what challenges have you faced?
Mm-hmm. I think one thing is that it's really difficult to connect with the people in our class and also our teachers. It's a little easier for juniors and seniors because these are people that we've been studying like amongst for like quite a few years. But I think especially for incoming freshmen and also sophomores, it's weird because for some classes, especially ones where there's a lot of discussion like literature, you go into breakout rooms and then there's the awkward silence and you don't get to talk about anything. There's no collaboration, there's no learning. And I think it can get really unproductive at times. Some other stuff is I know my teachers are really overwhelmed and they often mention it in class about like, because our schedule, because it's split up into block schedules for most of us, it's fine. But at the same time, for teachers, they have even more grading than ever before and in a shorter timeline. Then they have to figure out how to prevent cheating and how to grade everything online. And I think everyone's just really overwhelmed during this time. And there's like anxiety about the coronavirus and about the presidential election. And I think overall, it's just like really difficult to juggle all of these things at once.
So, what are some ways you have found to help yourself get motivated for online school? Since now it surely is very hard to get motivated because you're not even going to school, you're just sitting at home. So, what are some ways that you yourself have found to help yourself get motivated?
Mm-hmm. I think something that I actually learned this before. It was during my like SAT prep time during my junior year. Like I read somewhere that like when you're doing the SAT reading section, which is definitely by far the most objectively difficult part of the SAT, you have to kind of hype yourself up and tell yourself that it's interesting. Because the thing is, a lot of these reading passages that they give you, especially the ones that are like historical fiction and like actual historical documents from the 1700s, that they can be kind of boring at times. So it's really difficult to read through that in full detail and hang on to the meaning and the word choices so that by the time you reach the questions, you can actually answer them. So something I read is when you're reading it, tell yourself that this is interesting, right? Be like, okay, this is something that I didn't know before. So what am I learning right now? And I think using that method, I've been able to get myself to be excited and motivated about things that I didn't really think were that interesting to begin with. And that's helped me a lot, I'd say. In I think math has been a subject for me that's like sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. And I think especially when I find it difficult, it's hard for me to actually like it. Something that I've been trying to do a lot is when I learn a new concept, I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of amazing that people have learned to do something like this and they've created these methods for solving like just such like strange problems, right? Yeah, I think just like giving myself a mini pep talk and being like, okay, this is kind of cool. I think that's helped me a lot with gathering up the motivation to actually do my homework and really get engaged with my class, right? Because I've found that the more I found a class genuinely interesting and not just from the perspective of like, oh, this is one of my graduation requirements. I have to take this in order to graduate. I think like getting rid of that attitude and being like, this is pretty cool and something that I should actually pay attention to. That's helped me do better in my classes grade wise and also figure out what I actually like and want to pursue in my future.
Thank you, Malvika. That was a very good answer. It was a lot of things that are pretty true nowadays, where it is hard to motivate yourself during this online school because you get all of sort of the boring parts of school. Because when you went to school, you would get to see your friends, you get to talk to your friends, have lunch with your friends. But now it's all in an online setting, so you're still doing school, it's just isolated. So, what are some ways to motivate yourself to prepare for finals ahead of time? Now, finals during a normal school year are stressful as it is, but during this online school year, it's going to be tons more stressful. So, what are some ways you have found to help yourself with that?
I think something that I've been doing is kind of taking it day by day because I know when I look at it in the big scheme of things, I'm like, finals are like at least a good 2 months away, right? So I'm like, okay, I have tons of time, like I'm fine. And then also as a senior, I have college apps too. So it's really easy to be like, okay, I'm gonna keep like this week for college apps and then study for like let's say the chem exam next week. But when I look at it more in the perspective of like, okay, what am I going to do today? Then I think that's really helped me to. I know something that's helped me to add on to this is organization skills. I've been making a lot of checklists and schedules. So what I try to do is I look at today and then I make a checklist and I say today I have to work on chem and I have to work on my college apps and I have to work on let's say math, right? And then I set a specific time. I say 7 to 8:30 is to study for chem. So no matter what, like say I'm working on a specific college app and I haven't finished it by 7 p.m., I still say, okay, I've spent some time on it. Now it's time to move on to the next thing on my checklist. And that way I can make time for several things at once and also like not forcing myself to work on one thing for like many hours at a time. I think it gives me somewhat of like a mental break, like being able to switch between different kinds of work and then also like going downstairs, spending time with my family, and breaking things up in general. I think that's helped me not burn out.
Thank you so much, Malavika. That was a very in depth explanation and it was very insightful. So, our second panelist is Leah. Her name is Leah Anderson, and she is a senior at Harker High School. During her high school career, she has attended a total of 3 different high schools, so her high school experience has been a little odd. She participates in water polo at school, and she is also a member of her school spirit team. Hey, Leah, how do you manage the distractions around you during distance learning?
So, especially right now, I have 2 siblings, 2 cats, 2 dogs, and my parents are also working at home. So, there is kind of a lot going on at my house. So, I think the big thing for me was finding a place where I can focus by myself, where it's quiet and get away from because there's always noise in my house. I currently am going to Academic Coaching Works, which is like a coaching center. And of course, we're socially distanced from everybody, but it gives me kind of a quiet space to work by myself and get away from all the chaos.
So, how does the lack of social interaction in online school impact your motivation during online school?
I think the big part for regular school that helps get me motivated is okay, I have this class for an hour and a half, and then I can talk to my friends for 10 minutes in between. Being able to have that is something that's taken away with online school. So a big part for making sure I have that motivation is scheduling time with my friends so I still get that interaction. I spend Zoom calls after school with my water polo team, and sometimes we just do homework together, and sometimes we do team bonding and stuff, but it gives me a chance to still have that break from school in between. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that answer. So what are some ways to motivate yourself to prepare for finals ahead of time?
So at Harker, as a senior, you do not have to take finals. And this year, no one has to take finals because it's online, but which I think is really helpful. But I think a big thing for me in the past for preparing for finals was not saving all the studying till 2 weeks before. If you when you study for a test right now, you're studying for finals because they're not going to test you on something on the final that's not on a test or something you're learning in class. So a big thing for me was making sure I had thorough study guides for my last tests or flashcards. And then when 2 weeks before finals, it's more of a review instead of trying to cram all this information into my head because I had already done all the studying and preparation the entire year.
So why do you think it is important to be motivated for school, even though it is online?
Especially now, I think motivation is more important because before, we had our teachers telling us, oh, you can do this. If we were struggling with something, we could talk to them right before class. I think now having that motivation, like Malavika said, it's definitely intrinsic motivation, less. So it's making sure that when I will sit down and I'll write out a list and I'll be these are the most important things to do and these are less important to do. And just so that, because my motivation fades away pretty quickly, especially as I get later in the evening when I'm doing homework. I think it's important to put the most important things first so I have that motivation right away. And then if I don't get the later things done, the things that are due maybe in the next few days, I can do it tomorrow because my motivation has kind of run out and my ability to sit in front of a screen for that long of a time has kind of gone away.
So now we are going to introduce our third panelist, Taruna Khanna, and she is a teacher. After she graduated with a degree in microbiology and molecular genetics, she worked 9 years at a biotechnology company in the Bay Area. She enjoyed her career as a scientist, but she found the work deeply engaging, challenging, and rewarding. But as enjoyable and fulfilling her life as a scientist was, once her children were born, she made the decision to put her career on hold to raise her family. She never realized how much she would enjoy working with children, helping them grow and learn. The skills she had learned in this field solidified her interest in teaching, and she realized that she wanted to pursue it more formally to combine her first and second love, science and teaching. She believes her growth mindset helps her to go into the trenches with her students. She's taught a year at Fremont High School last year while finishing her master's degree in teaching, and this year teaching integrated science at a middle school for 7th and 8th graders, all online. She sees how the dynamics of student and teacher relationship is shifting to that of mentor and mentee. She's excited at the prospect of seeing how our education system will evolve to serve the different needs that students bring to the table. What are some challenges you as a teacher face over this online setting?
I was looking at the second poll question and where you kind of say kinda nope. So as a teacher, what I'm experiencing is there's a phrase we're using which says fixing the plane while flying. It literally feels that way most days. So whatever challenges the students are facing, trust that your teachers are feeling the same way. There was a lot. We were so used to switching to NGSS and doing hands-on everything that all of a sudden we're not able to do any of that. And yet the push is to go into like student-led learning. But how do you do that? How do you teach that? We weren't set up for that. So having to build that together every night, I can tell you, my grade level teachers and I were up till midnight, at least revamping, rethinking, researching the slide deck for the next day. Even though we're supposed to have everything ready on a Monday, not possible, because everything that you're feeling of you walking into a class and saying, I don't know what the teacher is doing today, and then there's Zoom issues. Some kids have the internet capabilities, some don't. So as a teacher, I feel like I don't know if you guys are Star Trek fans. I am. It looks like I'm sitting on USS Enterprise with like two screens and like a whole bunch of buttons in front of me while I'm trying to stay focused on what I need to teach. So as an online platform, it is a lot of fun, but it's also challenging for these little things that are happening at the same time. And I loved seeing how most of you are staying motivated for school, because that, as a teacher, is half the battle. If you do your part, then the teacher does their part, then this relationship becomes much more fruitful, I guess is the point. And Leah, what you mentioned about assessments and all of that, like, yeah, those are challenges. How do you keep it honest? How do you keep it clear? How do you keep it everybody motivated to learn at the same time? Because people are feeling different things with this pandemic, with this online, with not being around their social structures. So everything has sort of come to a standstill, and we're learning together. And I honestly, as a science geeky nerd, I find it fascinating. I have the epidemiology part in playing in my brain, then the social part playing in my brain. So all of this is challenging for everybody in the room. This little block of people that you see in little pictures, we're all feeling the same thing. And I think it's amazing that we're feeling it together, and hopefully we're able to troubleshoot together. So this poll of like, the few people who said, nope, we don't think our teacher is working with us, I wonder why you say that. I'm really curious, because most are trying very hard. I will say from my school site, at least, we have our staff developments wrapped around these things. So any questions that you guys have, I'll be happy, more than happy to answer. Like, the teachers are feeling the same challenges you are. We don't have the collaboration that you guys have with your friends either. Like, nobody's on school. We're all sitting in our little living rooms. So
Yeah, I think that is definitely a very good point that you bring up, that it is not only a problem with just students over an online setting, but it is definitely hard for the teachers as well. So kind of segueing off of that kind of answer, what do you like, why do you as a teacher really think that it's important for these students to get motivated for online school? And why is it really, definitely something that we need to be learning more how to do?
so I think going off of what Malvika you said too, this intrinsic motivation, right? Um, you could say, well, it's your job to teach the kids science, for example, or English or social science or math. Yes, it is our job, but it's also this um, so it's a motivation on both sides. My motivation is that given everything that's happening in this world, for students to be a part of this, like, I don't want you guys to just sit in your rooms and not be a part of anything. And education as large is to develop that mindset, right? It's not just the academics, it's also the life skills that hopefully we're learning together. Being accountable, being motivated to show up to that accountability, to hold to a routine. Those are all things that make us part of this structure of school, of how do you call that, like civics, right? This is literally your life in the making. So all of us are part of that. Your parents are a part of that, your teachers are a part of that, your coaches, your therapists, your doctors, your friends. We're all part of this social interaction that we as humans take very seriously. I mean, TikTok, so Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all these things. Why do you think we interact with these things? We are social. We like that. So how do you learn in that arena, given what we have right now, right? Is that the kind of my reasoning for showing up every day? My reasoning for going from one Zoom class to the next as fast as I can, and each set of kids in that class bring a special personality, like these 30 little pictures that I see on my screen. That whole collective has a specific personality, and when they are motivated, I'm motivated. When they want to learn, I want to teach. When they ask me a question and they are curious, even if it's off topic, I'm okay with it being off topic, because that's where their brain is and that's where I want to meet them. And each teacher will meet you where you are. You walk in there, I mean, if I was sitting here like this, like this, you don't want to talk to me. You don't care what I have to say. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing as a teacher, as a human being that I'm dealing with as well. And this humanity working together is why teaching works. It's why schools are doing what they're doing. It's not just a place for you to sit down and just do, I don't know, worksheet after worksheet after worksheet. That would be so pointless. But this conversation, this interaction, that is way more important, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the points you said. And I guess just wrapping this whole thing up, what maybe is like one strategy you would give students or teachers alike to maybe help them get more motivated and kind of reach those goals that you were mentioning about?
So I think, given everything that's happening in the world today, it's easy for us to give up. And that give up happens when you feel the fatigue. So build self care into your day. I have a feeling that most of your teachers don't mind if you're snacking in class, as long as you're not kind of licking a plate. I don't even know what you would be doing, whipped cream in your mouth. I don't know. Don't do that. Don't do anything distracting. But I think self-care while you're in school is totally fine. Understanding that this is something, it will pass, it is temporary, but your learning will happen. And it's more routines for yourself. Like, I feel like if you have no routines built into your life, then you struggle more later on. Just holding yourself accountable helps motivate. Just holding onto a routine helps motivate. Just taking care of yourself. If it means you have an incense burning next to you, then heck, have an incense burning next to you. I think that's super cool. And share it with the teacher. Go, today I'm smelling rose. Today I'm smelling sandalwood. And this is why. I think the teacher will probably put on her incense in front of you too. And just keep this going. This communication is so important to keep that motivation going, I feel.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a very insightful advice. All right. So moving on to our next panelist, who is Stacy Howard, and she is an EF coach. And yeah, so we'll be quickly going into her bio. So Stacy actually holds an MBA and a BS in Human Services from Notre Dame de Nemours, both with honors. So in addition, she holds a CET from the UC Santa Cruz Extension and a certificate for legal advocacy from the William and Mary Law School Institute of Special Education Advocacy, over 20 years of experience of advocacy, as well as from the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocate. Stacy brings over 20 years of experience teaching math and is passionate reading, writing, critical thinking, and executive function skills to youth of all ages. She is passionate about identifying, developing, and implementing individualized skills and strategies to best support student self-awareness and success. Stacy believes that motivation, self-confidence, and the ability to self-advocate are essential keys necessary for success, and works to instill these in her students. So without further ado, let's take it to the questions. So really quickly, Ms. Howard, would you mind telling us what executive function really means and what exactly you do as an educational consultant or EF coach?
Great. Thank you. This is such a big question. There are so many definitions when we talk about executive functioning, but really it's a way of thinking and utilizing information that helps with understanding expectations, making connections between information, experiences, assignments, personalities. It involves working memory, holding and remembering information and manipulating it, cognitive flexibility and perspective taking, right, willingness to check in, shift when necessary, change your perspective or interpretation. It's planning and organization, your thoughts, things, materials, and places, self-awareness, which leads to self-advocacy, self-regulation, the ability to stop and calm yourself so you have access to your logical, rational brain, motivation, initiation and completion of tasks, problem solving, and critical thinking. So EF, in my opinion, is a very broad umbrella that sits over everyone, not just academically, but also for your independent living skills. In my opinion, an EF coach helps an individual better understand themselves so that the individual will be open to learning new skills and strategies that will make life and learning easier for them.
All right, thank you so much. And let Vihan continue with the next questions.
So the next question is that how have your students' responses to learning changed after the pandemic?
I've had a split in responses. I've had some students who benefit from not having the non-academic opportunities, right? Extracurricular activities, social interactions. That's a very specific profile of students. The majority of my students are finding the virtual learning model to be very difficult. They're struggling with staying engaged during their sessions, right? Attending to tasks, feeling comfortable asking clarifying questions. What's the right modality for me to connect with my teacher? And the other thing is many of my students miss the social opportunity, as Leah said, like that 10 minutes between class after school, right, where I can connect with you, that gives me the break I need before I go to that next subject.
So my last question for you is that what is one method that you have used to help kids in online remote learning stay engaged during this pandemic?
That's a great question. I will tell you, the predominant skill that I focus on specifically related to the virtual learning model is related to self-awareness and an appropriate, effective routine, right? So Leah talked about it, and I love, Leah, that you shared. You're like, it gets later in the day, I've lost my energy and my motivation, right? That's crucial. because then you need to focus your schedule more so in the time when you do have the energy, right? And that cognitive burst and motivation. I challenge that motivation is intrinsic. I think that motivation is because you've made a connection to the outcome that's meaningful and purposeful to you. So I say that because the routine has to fit who you are and keep you engaged, right? And Taruna, you're right. We're all in this together and we're all struggling. And I think it's so crucial for us adults to share that with our kids, right? And, and students, sorry, I say kids because my clients are all my kids. But students, right? You as an individual, I think you need to know your parents are struggling, your teachers are struggling, right? You are not the only one feeling this discomfort. And so I say this routine because for me, in the routine, do you have this set up in a way that meets your needs? Do you have breaks, right? Whether it be a movement break. Malavika said, I go downstairs, right? I'm assuming Leah plays with her animals to like rejuvenate herself. But how do I take a break that allows me to disengage and re-energize, right? To return to task. Am I hungry, right? Like we have to think about, everyone laughs about the term hangry. It's true. So have you had water? Are you eating appropriately? Are you making, good food choices? Do you have, breaks for you, right? That are appropriate and effective for you? And are you connecting socially with people, right? Because the mental health component is if we're isolated, we're struggling. And so all of that is built into your routine. Now, different students need a different individualized routine. It's appropriate, right? So I caution parents because there's never one size fits all, right? You have to know yourself and you have to be willing to also try new strategies, skills, right? To see how it works. And part of this is like, remember I was saying like the cognitive flexibility, you reflect on, did this work for me or not, right? Because I think our older students know themselves better, right? They've had past experiences where they can reflect on this worked or this didn't. I think for younger students, it's harder because they haven't had those concrete experiences to reflect back on. So the answer to your question is establishing an effective and appropriate routine that is crucial for everyone, not just students, but parents, teachers, right? And recognizing self-care. Like it's okay to take a break. It's okay to do something that brings you joy. So that's kind of my area.
Yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful answer. And now moving on, we will go to Andrea, and she is the therapist. And yeah, so she is a therapist specialized in working with teens in her private practice in Los Altos, and she helps young women manage past anxiety, stress, social challenges, and depression to lead lives more of resiliency and to thrive their best selves. Prior to working in a private practice, she also worked at Children's Health Council with teens, Mountain View High School, and for 9 years on campus at Stanford's Graduate School of Business in student life, helping students. So, Andrea, in your experience, what struggles are students facing with distance learning and, getting motivated for this online school over Zoom?
So I would say that, just repeating or not to repeat what everybody else has said, but I think that this time has been such a unique time of not just kind of crashes of motivation for some people, but I think there's more commonly dips and waves of motivation, that, on one day a person might be feeling really energized, and other days it's almost like there's this malaise and this kind of low energy, almost like you're kind of walking through molasses sometimes. And I think it's really understandable that happens from time to time. I think one teen put it really well, that sometimes it's hard because things mush together, like personal and academic. There really isn't as much separation anymore. The social and the academic and the personal, it all kind of gets mushed together. And so it can feel as though things are more heavy and longer than they used to be, because we don't have buckets of time. And so I think, building on what Stacy was talking about, and I think a couple of other panelists too, it's really important to kind of separate out time to be able to manage that dip of motivation. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of students who've gone to online school. And I guess something would be, are you seeing maybe like an increased anxiety or depression since online school has started? And if so, really, how are you kind of helping kids cope with these?
Great question. So I would say it's absolutely across the board that it's really, really common that people are experiencing higher levels of anxiety and depression. We're going through a collective trauma right now of the unknown. So that always builds this greater sense of anxiety. It might not even be that you're walking around thinking about a what if worry. It's just that you might kind of feel in the back of your head this kind of tenseness or kind of like jumpiness. And so it's understandable that that's going on for you. And I would really invite everybody to have compassion that is a part of the pandemic that's going on. It's not about you and your personality and anything that is wrong with you. It's really about managing through something that's completely and wholly unique, that your parents have never even experienced before. So to get back to your question even more, I would say that it is really hard for a lot of students with the anxiety, but also with that depression, kind of that sense of, there can be a sense of not just unknown, but kind of there's a grieving happening. I think last time or last fall, last spring, there was a lot more in the news about people grieving over, the loss of graduation and the loss of these types of things. And what I've noticed is that there isn't as much conversation about that anymore, but it's actually still ongoing. And so it's understandable that, for you, Malavika, here you are applying to college, and there's an unknown of what that's going to look like next year. And so there might be still excitement about it, along with kind of a sense of sadness, because you don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I guess kind of to wrap this all up, wrapping the panel questions up and just kind of wrapping everything in the webinar up. What is some advice, I guess, that you would give to these students who are maybe struggling with anxiety or depression, or just kind of having to face this online new setting for school?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to do, if you guys don't mind, is I'm going to share a little screenshot here and see how that goes, just to kind of walk through really rapidly. So how to get and stay motivated for distance learning. So small tips that people have already mentioned, really having a morning routine so that you don't have to think about it. It's just an automatic go-to. You don't have to put out any energy to it. Get dressed. I think I have, as if you're going to school, you can do it in a fun way. I've had some kids decide that they're going to do, Monday is yellow day, throw in some novelty in there. I've had people kind of do like themes with their friends, oh, we're going to do goth today. Or like a whole group will dye their hair red in a streak that's just temporary, just feeling a sense of community, something new, something to look forward to. stretch and yoga between classes, just so that you're engaging the body and that you're getting more, a little bit more of a pop of energy, because we're missing that pop of energy of interacting with people in a social way. And so we kind of need some filler for that. Texting with friends between classes, I think Leah and Malavika had mentioned that as well. Fidgeting is okay, as long as it's not distracting. Doodling idly is okay if that helps you to stay engaged, just as long as it's not distracting and like you're jumping from one thing to another. Asking questions and being just engaged in the process of learning. You know, it helps you not just to be managing distance learning, but it helps you grow as a person, to be taking some of those small risks of being a little bit social when it feels a little bit uncomfortable. That's what you guys are missing a bit, is those kind of opportunities of slight risks and slight social risks. And so there are some of those opportunities available. They might not be as exciting and enticing, but that is one of the ways that you could kind of keep yourself a little bit more engaged. And then celebrating small accomplishments. So, you know, you finish, you know, one application, you finish that dreaded assignment that you weren't looking forward to. Take a break, go get a little snack, tell your parents that you finished it and you're thrilled. But something just to mark things so that it doesn't feel, again, like everything's mushing together. And then the last thing is novelty. So novelty, we're missing this these days. As teens, you guys really need newness, and you need experimentation, and the pandemic isn't providing that a lot for you guys. So you have to get really creative. So figuring out a way of maybe doing something new, like an art project that you've never done before, you know, jump on YouTube and find something that's easy, and just try it out. But something that kind of pops things a little bit for you. And then I think the last one we've already talked about, which is really finding your why. And it has to be personal for you. Looking at, you know, what is compelling for you about learning, not about the end grade, but what maybe there's some satisfaction to completing things, to doing well, or just to checking things off your list. Learning for learning's sake, something that is kind of compelling you forward. And let's see. So I have others, but I'm not sure if we have enough time, so I can kind of stop it there. And I'll leave it up to you, the panel, the co-hosts, where you guys want to go.
Yeah, I think those are actually some really great ideas. I know personally I found yoga to be really helpful, especially before I have like this big test online.
Yeah.
I do like a sun salutation and it really helps.
Right.
Yeah, so now moving on from that, we're gonna actually begin our Q&A. So I know that we've had a few Q&As in the chat. So there's one that says, for Leah, would you recommend this program of academic works to other high schoolers, and is it helpful?
I would definitely recommend Academic Coaching Works. It's ACW for short. There is actually an interview with the creator of it, Caitlin Hoffman, on the Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving podcast. I have listened to it, and I would definitely recommend listening to it. I have attended Academic Coaching Works since the beginning of the beginning of the year, so since January. It's a place that allows you to have help whenever you need it. There's coaches that are sitting around the center constantly, so it's slightly different than a tutor where you have this scheduled one-on-one time for only like an hour a week. There's people here who can help with chemistry, math, science, language, whatever you need. I definitely enjoy, it gives me an opportunity to interact with other students, which isn't as common right now. I both work here and come as a student here, and it's just like this community is one of my favorite things of like the day. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. And like, so to repeat, it's Academic Coaching Works, and the podcast is on the Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving podcast in the Parent Series with Caitlin Hoffman.
Yeah, so just to echo what Leia said at the end, Taarika Foundation does have this Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving podcast, and I believe it's available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify if you're interested in listening. So if anyone else in the attendees has any questions, feel free to input it in the Q&A. Oh, there is one. All right, so one person is asking how can they be motivated for an AP class, especially on test days when you can get questions about concepts that are not really assigned by a teacher. So I guess maybe Taarika, can you answer this?
So this thing of not assigned by the teacher, I would question that just a little bit. Here's the thing. If you know that you're studying chapter 15, you know that chapter 15 is being covered. If the teacher didn't specifically say chapter 15, section 1, I mean, you still know it's chapter 15. So I will say that if there's a question on an AP class that's coming, it could also be that they pulled it from the AP tests to help you prep. But in terms of reading, your textbook may not exactly match what the question was. That could be what's happening. But I would say that before you put it all on the teacher, investigate a little bit. Go from this idea of like, hey, this is what I noticed. Can you please help me figure this out? Go with this intention of not dinging another human being, but more of like, hey, let's figure it out together. So if you guys play investigative reporter together, it goes a lot easier than if you're going with like, you didn't put this on the reading and now it's on the test. Well, you kind of put the teacher on the defensive too. And then the teacher just like, well, I don't know what your problem is. So then you go into this rabbit hole of a mess. So as a teacher, what I'm trying to remember is that this is the kid in the center. Kid is learning. I have the kid's best interest at heart, and I know as a parent you have the best interest at heart. I come from the hat of a parent and a teacher and all these other hats that we all wear, and we just have to make sure that we're assuming that we're all there for the betterment of the kid. So if it's an AP class, you never know. It could be a test question pulled from an AP test for AP classes, I would say. And I think, Stacy, you've probably seen this more happen often than not.
And so I agree with you, Taruna. A lot of times for my kids, they have been fed so much direct information that they don't take the initiative. And so I typed in a response that said, looking at previous AP tests that are online, right? Considering purchasing an AP study guide. I have to say, it is complicated because each teacher identifies what they view as important in preparation for the AP test, which may not be directly from a textbook. So I always feel like if you can go to the College Board, because that's where the AP test comes from, it's your best option, right? And you'll get the information you need. I did see a lot of questions in regards to how to manage distractions in regards to when you're online. And I mean, I can tell you as an adult what I recommend for students, which is there is actually Google extensions that will stop you from having access to opening up non-academic programs. And that's what we call like assistive technology. Because a lot of times you're not engaged, and so you're trying to engage yourself, but you've split your attention onto something else. So I'd be really curious, because I'm always transparent. What are the students on the panel doing regarding how they're managing attention, engagement, and not going on to other tabs, video games, going down the YouTube rabbit hole?
So, Monisha Gandhi has a question. She has this question for an EF coach. How can kids prioritize work and work on their homework and plan and organize better? Are there any tricks that you would recommend to do that?
So the tricks are building skills. And to build the skill, you have to understand where the student's starting from. You have to know what the appropriate age of the student is to understand the expectation of level of independence. With all of that said, it's very helpful to sit down and build a routine. How do I check what I need to do? How do I holistically consider my life? Everyone, our students here had other things besides school, right? So how do I check in with school? Do I have a calendar? And you can use Google Calendar, you can use a paper calendar, whatever works for the student. But most students need a visual reminder of what are the expectations, and they need to create time awareness and time management to see where that would go. So routine on how they gather the information to prioritize it, and then having some sort of calendaring method, right, that lets them plan and see where they might have time. The prioritization, it depends on the student. Do you need them to do more difficult tasks earlier in the day because they get tired? Or are they kids that don't wake up well in the morning and you put more challenging tasks in the afternoon?
And the question on the phone too, Manisha, it's a tool. Phones are tools. They're mini computers that can do many wonderful things. It depends on the kid. It depends on the situation. I wouldn't presume to, in this time especially, to say anything about screen times. I used to be one of those moms that was very strict about why do you need a phone? But especially in this, where we're always on a screen, I don't actually have an answer. I think it depends on the kid and depends on their self-control, self-regulation. Is it the appropriate time for it? That's all something that maybe a conversation within the family needs to happen of what that looks like. And I would say all rules fell out the window March 13th. So that's kind of what I'm noticing.
So I have a different approach. I do think kids of a certain age do benefit from having a phone because they can download their G Suite information and set reminders, right? So now it's on something that they use. And I'm transparent. I could not do the work I do without my phone. I would never make the 10 meetings I have a day without my phone helping me do that so that I can focus on the content. Now, with that said, setting reminders, right? This is when I need to stop to do something else. This is, look, my calendar says I need to be at this class right now. Or I have this upcoming assignment and I've chunked it. So to me, with a certain level of maturity, phones are appropriate and are actually a beneficial tool. And for parents, it is really important to recognize what you model. Because if my son were ever, if I were to be like, you can't use your phone, he would call me out on that, right? Because that's how I survive. So I think like Taruna said, it it depends on your household, it depends on the child, and it depends on what you expect the outcome to be.
Thank you so much. So we have one more question in our Q&A, and it is asked by Ambrose C. She says that usually what was demotivating is when her child was told by a teacher that the only grades of the final exams will count, not the scores that they get at the beginning of the year. Is that true? I think it is important for teachers to make sure that the work students put in during the entire year counts. Andrea, could you please answer this question?
Well, I don't know if that's really my area of expertise, but I'm happy to kind of put some thoughts into that. I would think that, you know, if a student is putting in a lot of effort throughout the academic year, including the whole semester, and then is surprised by realizing that actually all of that work isn't going to count at all, that I think that that would likely build up some resentment and some sense of wanting to disengage and feeling like it's not fair. And so I think, you know, it might be something slightly different if a student knew that right away at the beginning that that was what it was going to be like. But I still think at the high school level that that's a lot to ask of our students, to only have the end work be the source of a grade, just because it's very, it's demotivating over time. If you're not kind of, we have high school built up in a different way than college to kind of give more benchmarks, because it is harder for high school students to learn, as Stacy's been talking about. They're on training wheels about learning how to self-manage, right? That's what life is like when you're a teenager. Like Malavika, you had mentioned that too, right? You've got to figure out your strategies to work. And so lovely as it is in high school, you get to play around with that. That's the time to learn what works for you and what your systems are. And so it does sound like it wouldn't be kind of reinforcing that notion of building up the skills of self-management. It sounds like it's more of a sink or swim. And that I could really understand where that might make a teen feel really frustrated and demotivated. And that might be a time to have some honest conversations to make sure that the school might be aware of that too, and just kind of trying to get everybody on board with what you're feeling like a student's needing, especially since your teen reached out to you, which is a really good sign. We want teens to be able to reach out for help when they're really needing it. And if they feel like they're really sinking, then that's the time to step in and help them again through that time of learning things on their own, of how do you manage a system, how do you manage a bureaucracy, how do you manage a relationship with somebody that's older than you, like your teacher. So all of those things are really good for you to kind of coach your teen through.
And I'd like to piggyback on what Andrea said. For me, I work all over the peninsula to the South Bay. So I would really start to check in on what was discussed and call a meeting with the teacher, because I will share with you, even at my most prestigious high schools, that is not a conversation that's happening. And so I feel like there may have been a misunderstanding. Now, if the child's in college, yes, I see that happening because that's a very typical expectation. But if you're talking about the high school or below level, I think one of the things is to model for your students self-advocacy and asking clarifying questions to ensure they understood, right? That there wasn't a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation. And also help them set expectations, because the teachers I know all give a syllabi, right, for all the classes. So you can check in to see what the expectation is. You can go to office hours, right? You can have a Zoom call and discuss like, wow, we were really, and you always take this approach, like we were really confused by this comment, and we'd like to check in with you. And Taruna, tell me, I mean, every teacher I know is like, oh my God, thank you for talking to me. I'm so sorry there was that misunderstanding. Let's walk through that.
Exactly. No, teachers are humans too. Holy cow. And we make mistakes. That's definitely the case. But like, I don't imagine that I would put work out that I'm not willing to grade and read and give feedback on. Maybe it's not graded, but there will definitely be feedback that feeds into like a final project at some point. But like, I can't imagine creating to create one assignment, it takes at least 2 to 3 hours minimum, to be fair. So why would I spend 3 hours creating an assignment that I'm not going to look at just to give you guys something to do? Heck, it's easier for me to just sit there and watch Ed Puzzles for the whole period. That would be way easier. So I can't imagine that any teacher does that. On the other hand, who knows? We come in all shapes and sizes, apparently, and mental capabilities. So who knows? But I've never heard that. I've never seen that except in sort of like a PBL, like a project-based school learning type of a situation. But even then, there's benchmarks, there's checkpoints. There are some points along the way. So I would question that, like Stacy said. I would bring that up.
So now we are done with the Q&A section of our webinar.
Thank you again. I cannot again thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. I am delighted to have this very awesome webinar with so many experts who came today. So thank you again, and hope we will continue to work together in the future. Have a good weekend, guys. Stay safe.